Today I'm talking to Brian Ayer. I have to tell you in the introduction, because he won't even let me mention his success when he's around, that in 2016, as an individual agent, he closed more volume and transactions than any agent in Silicon Valley. And in the last 5 years and counting, he has closed more transactions in Silicon Valley, again, than any other agent. Today we talk about how to leverage your resources to explode your business.
Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast is to share knowledge for realtors and raise awareness for Give Back Homes, where real estate professionals work together for social good. Jet Centers Aviation, Bentley Atlanta, Legends Global, thank you for your sponsorship.
All right, everybody, it's the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. Today, we are so excited because we have Brian Ayer. He is with Sotheby's International Realty in Silicon Valley. Brian, thank you for being on the show and for your time today.
Thanks, Jerry. So good to see you, and thanks for having me on the show.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm in Silicon Valley, which is just south of San Francisco. It's about 30 minutes south of San Francisco. Working in the Valley, and what else?
How about this? Tell us your story. How were you crazy enough to get into this business and become an agent?
Crazy is right. So my background is actually in logistics. I used to manage a logistics company in LA, and it was basically problem solving all day long. And it's essentially what we do as real estate agents here. So back there, I was customer service, sales, problem solving, and management. And I'm like, that's what I do on a daily basis here.
So what was it that made the transition? That you what was the life? Was it you just wanted to do something different, or what led to the decision to get out of that and come into this?
Yeah, completely something different. So like I said, I was living in LA at the time. I moved up here. Changed jobs completely, took a little bit of time off, and then fell into real estate almost by accident, which is what you hear a lot of people, but it was a good transition for sure, which is really funny because one of my sales girls back in LA told me, hey, you should be a real estate agent. And I said, I would never do that.
I seriously have the same story. People used to tell me all the time, you should be a real estate agent. I was like, not one of those people.
That's what I said. I would never do that. So,
never. I am not that person. And here we are.
I got up here and I started working with an agent, and I was like, I can do your job better than you do. And anyway. And
then you did? Most people say that and they don't, by the way, as you know.
Because they don't think it's easy. They think, oh, you drive some people around, look at houses, and it's pleasant. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not easy at all.
I love quoting Jason O'Neill all the time, but it's so relevant. We're dealing with any wise person will tell you, never deal or bother with other people's home, money, or family. That's exactly what we're being hired to engage in over and over and over. Exactly. Definition for drama. So we are problem solvers and emotion diffusers.
That's right. And that's the biggest thing that I say all the time is you have to take the drama out of it, because you're dealing with their houses, their family, and their money, and there's all this emotion that's tied up in it. And agents, realistically, they create their own problems, or they take the problem and they amplify it. And I always say, first and foremost, take the emotion out of it, because you have to be the same rational person for these clients.
Well, when people are emotional, they can't think clearly. So that's what we're there for, to help them think clearly and help them to diffuse the emotion so that they can. That being said, being a top real estate agent, we're in such a competitive industry. How is it that you are able to win business and have a competitive edge and be one of the top agents in such a competitive business?
A lot of it's the logistics. I mean, it's managing the problems, but it's also managing preparation for the houses and preparation for marketing and things like that. A lot of the sales here, the average sales time here is about a week or 10 days. It's pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be ready in advance.
And what's your average sales price? You're in Silicon Valley. What's the average sales price?
It depends on the county. It depends on the city, but it's somewhere in the mid twos, roughly.
Wow, yeah. That's in Atlanta. That's closer to the top of our market.
There's a bulk of sales that bring it down quite a bit. So probably around 2 or so, I'd say.
Wow. So you're talking about a $2 million house takes, if your statistics are if the average sales price and average days on market line up, you're talking about $2 million house sells in about a week.
Pretty much anything under $3 million sells in about a week. But a lot of it depends on the pricing, agent presentation, and the preparation you do as well, because everybody wants turnkey right now. So if you go in advance and you prepare the home,
right,
turnkey, so they can just bring their clothes and move in, it sells immediately right away. And here's the other.
That's the key. Okay.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is the days on market would actually be shorter, except we all hold offers. And so we say we're not looking at any offers until day 8 of the listing. And then you collect all the offers together, you present them to the seller, and they choose one. And that's why our days on market is actually higher than it would be normally. So
how do you, I'm going to ask you more about that, but before we get there, I want to know, so you say, well, I stand out above the competition because I have this great listing process and all this great stuff I do, but you've got to make sure that your customer, you get in front of your customer who becomes your client and make sure that they know that that's what you do. How did you do that in the beginning, and how do you continue to do that now?
In the beginning, it was a little bit more challenging because I moved up here and I didn't know anybody. I'd never even been to Silicon Valley. Pretty much had to look at a map to figure out where it was. So I had to learn the areas, learn the neighborhoods, and also expand my network as quickly as possible to start meeting people. Now it's a little bit easier because we host open houses for our listings. And so I have a full-time licensed assistant who also hosts some of my open houses for me. And when people come through the open house, we explain to them what we did to prepare the home for sale. One of the houses I sold, they watched the transformation. We did it in 12 days, and it was a full makeover of the house. I mean, extensive remodel, so much so that the neighbors came through and they said, "Oh my God, I thought that house was abandoned."
So when you do that, is that typical in your market, or is that something very specific to you?
It depends. It depends on the agent. It's typical that you do some prep work, but the amount that I do and some of the people in my company, we do it a lot more extensively than most agents around here.
So walk us through that. Walk us through. You win the listing. They hire you. How do you get started? And how do you set expectations? And how much involvement does the seller have in that process?
Well, let's back up just 1 second. So it's actually for the listing presentation. So most of the sellers right now, they interview, I don't know, at least the ones that I've interviewed for is 4 to 7 agents every listing presentation. And so you go in there, and a lot of the time I'm at the end. I don't really care what order I'm in. It doesn't really make a difference because I stand out because of what I do. And so one of them called me and said, "Hey, I've already interviewed 4 people. I've already picked one, but I figured why not bring in a 5th?" And I went in there, got the listing signed right away. And so I just explained to them, I said, "Hey, the biggest way you can benefit this move is just to get out of the house." One of them called me and said, I want you to put my house on the market in 10 days. I said, "Perfect. How quickly can you get out?" And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, "I'll move on Saturday." I was like, "Perfect." So he moved over the weekend, gave me the keys on Monday, and then had his house on the market the following Friday. That was with marketing, with photos, refinished all the hardwood floors, painted, landscaped. I mean, top to bottom, complete renovation of the house.
So who do you fund that, or does your seller fund that?
I don't fund it. No, the sellers always do. And so what I'll do, I'll meet with them, and I give them the price. Your house in its current state right now would sell for approximately this. So of course, there's always a range. But I say, okay, and so by doing a whole laundry list of items that I'll detail for you, you'll put in X amount of money, and I can guarantee you're going to get at least 3 times the return back on that. But my average is usually more like 6 or 7-fold. And when they look at these numbers, these are huge numbers. There's no reason why they wouldn't say, "Sure, let's give it a shot and try it." So, I mean, frankly, I charge more for commission, which pays me to do all this work. I have an assistant who manages the whole project. So once the listing's signed, I go through and I give them an a la carte list that says, "Here are all the things I'd recommend doing in order to get your house on the market." Go through the list and tell me which ones you'd want to do. All but one time, they approve the entire list. Then we get bids. We get bids before that. They approve the entire list, and then my assistant goes and manages the whole project. We have all the vendors that we work on all the time. Most of my vendors, I can call them up and say, "Hey, I need you to come tomorrow and start tomorrow." They rearrange their schedules. They get me on schedule because we give them tons of projects for them.
Wow, and they want to stay on your list. And that's a huge benefit of having an agent and being an agent and having you as an agent, is you've got leverage with vendors that they just don't. They're going to get on the waiting list.
And that's the thing. I always say you have to stay in contact with people and be a resource for them. So I have clients who call me year after year after year, and they say, "Hey, I need a roofer, I need a gardener, I need whatever." I'm sure you have the same in your market. But being that resource, they always come back to me. And funny, I just moved recently, about 6 months ago, and I moved up to San Francisco temporarily. And I didn't know who's the dry cleaner, who's the landscaper, all these things that I take for granted with my clients. I was back in that situation, which just, emphasizes you need to be that resource for
And
it.
how valuable that is, especially when we take for granted our resources.
Of course. And so in San Francisco, I represented myself because I sometimes sell a little bit up there as well. I represented myself, so I didn't have the agent to go to and say, who should I use? Who should I call? And now I value that even more. And that's one thing, just to stay in front of clients, you're constantly that resource for them. And I let them know years to come. And they always apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry to call you and ask you for a painter. I'm like, this is what I do.
Exactly.
And if you want me to come and give you a color consult, I'll do that as well. And they're like, no. Would you really? I'm like, of course. Like, I love doing this. And then, of course, every time somebody says, I love your house color, then say, great, my agent, Brian, picked out the color.
Oh, that's awesome. So I have someone, I'll say, well, this is about what color you're going to use, but we're going to call Kelly, my stager, and she's going to tell us exactly what to use.
Yeah.
And that's where we all have our strengths. I know I'm okay at that, but I've got somebody who's really good at that. But you're already good at that. And you leverage that.
I've gotten better at it. I'm pretty good at it. I used to call my stager and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And they would choose them. And now I have a pretty good eye for color and design. I actually just remodeled my house in Silicon Valley. We just finished construction. I just got the biggest compliment. One of my neighbors walked by. I hadn't seen her in a while. And she's like, your house is amazing. She's like, I love what you've done. Are you an architect? And I said, absolutely not. I'm a real estate agent. Gave her my card. She's like, I'm going to tell everybody I know to call you because you're so good at this. I said, okay.
That's awesome.
Biggest compliment.
Yeah, it's huge. So back to getting the word out, getting your competitive edge. You found a way. I'm going to kind of restate this in brief. Is a great way to do it is, now you do open houses, you meet people. They're in for conversation. You let them know everything that's been done to the house because it also helps present the value of how turnkey it is and how ready it is for people to move into that. And that usually, you tell me, but that usually piques their interest that you're doing so much for these listings before they go on the market?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
it's just a conversation of what we've done. And half the time they've seen the house before from the outside, maybe not from the inside, or if they were friends with the seller, they saw it and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what a transformation this is. And so it's an initial conversation.
Well, we've done a referral, and your client was so excited because you were going to stage their house. And I'll be damned if you didn't sell it before you got to stage it.
Yes.
I loved it. So because people love that.
Well, and the reason they found me is they see all my postings on Facebook and Instagram, and they said, we want you to do that to our house that you do for everything else because all of your listings are beautiful. I'm like, some of my clients are hoarders. They're not beautiful, and we go in and we make them beautiful.
Now, so I don't want to get too off path here, but this is relevant because a lot of our challenge in this business is when you have people who hoard or people who, don't understand that it's when you sell it, it's not yours anymore. How do you break through that and get these guys to open up to such drastic changes in their home?
It depends. I've had really good clients, and they're open to that. A lot of them have said, oh, I've always wanted to remodel my house. I've always wanted a new kitchen. And so they're open to that. And a lot of time they say, I've seen what you've done. I trust you. And so they're usually not that involved in the process. They let me pick finishes. They let me do whatever I want. I've already given them a list and I've given them a budget, so they know what they're spending. But a lot of time they don't do it is because they have the paralysis of just where do I start? How much is it going to cost? And who do I hire? And who do you hire is the biggest problem. I've run into a lot of people, they're doing construction for 2 years. They're not done yet. And they're like, the contractors keep quitting. I just have the wrong guy. And I'm like, hey, let me get my guy in here and we finish it up in weeks. And they're like, how have you done that?
So, and how did you get started in that niche? How did that catch on for you? Is it just something you've always been good at it and done? And how did that evolve?
It's building. So, it's a very good question. I don't know. It's, I started in real estate and I started in the bottom of the market in 2010 here. So I've only been in business about 8.5 years.
Yeah.
And, you start by presenting the homes. My very first listing, this lady had a Pepto-Bismol pink dining room, and the ceiling was painted too, and it wasn't selling.
Oh, wow.
And she said, why isn't my house selling? And I said, well, first we have to paint this pink dining room.
Pepto-Bismol dining room.
no idea. And so it just started with like a little bit. And she wouldn't move out, she wouldn't stage, but we did a little bit of work on that one, and then it just kept growing and growing. And then eventually, I mean, the last one I did, it was top to bottom, including a brand new roof, new windows, and we got it on the market, and I made about 4 times the return on that.
Wow, that's impressive. And what, and now, and here's, I don't want to get too off track, but I do think it's relevant because I think about Atlanta, markets like Atlanta, where that's not typical at all to do those kind of transformations and get that kind of return. Staging, painting, we do a lot of that. It does depend on the house, but in your market, it sounds like it's pretty typical that you can put that into a house and really get 4 times the return on it. So are there a lot of agents that do what you do, or is that something that you do specifically, and is it even kind of your niche?
It is a niche for sure. There's a lot of agents that do it, but it's a different extent as well. And some of them do a little bit, some of them do extensive. A couple do more than I do, but basically I go in there and I talk to the sellers and I'm like, I'm not going to spend your money. I'm going to tell you how to spend it wisely. And so a lot of the time they say, oh, I need brand new kitchen cabinets. And I'm like, you don't need kitchen cabinets. You need to paint them because they're in good shape. And so we actually whittle it down. We give them good advice as to how to maximize what they're putting into the house. And it makes a lot of sense to them. And, looking at the numbers, and I get one client, he's in finance, high level accountant, he's a VP, and he wanted specific examples. So I gave him a spreadsheet. I said, here are 3 houses that I've done. Here's what we put into it. Here's the return. Here's the before pricing. Here's the after pricing. And he said, it's a no-brainer. They interviewed 11 agents on that one. 11 agents.
Wow.
Finally, I gave him the spreadsheet, and he's like, absolutely, please go ahead and do it.
Wow. So going into that on pricing, we've talked in the past about having the conversation of pricing with our clients and how, so walk us through your market a little bit. So typically houses are on the market, you told us, for 7 days. Usually, anything under $3 million is going to sell in 7 days. And how often are there listings that go on the market and never sell? And how common is it that something goes on the market and doesn't sell?
Yeah. In this market, it's rare that something comes on the market that doesn't sell. It's either it's poorly presented, there's an issue with the seller, like they have unrealistic expectations, or it's overpriced. I mean, that's even in this market, if you overprice something, it's the death to the listing. But somebody else will pick up the listing, it'll go back on the market, they'll price it correctly, and it will sell. And usually it sells pretty close to where they had it listed initially. There's just a lot of strategy in pricing.
So that's important. Is that you put it on the market you put it on the market at a price, it doesn't sell. You lower the price, and then the house sells for what it was initially listed for.
Sometimes it does, yeah. But you don't want to do that.
That's
you don't
huge.
Want to do that anyway, you want to price it correctly the first time, and that's the explanation of this. The discussion with the seller is just saying, hey, there's different pricing strategies. Each one is going to take a different amount of time, and it's going to produce a different result. Which one do you want? And so I give them the options in the beginning. It's fully their choice, and then as we talked about earlier, repeat it back to them. This is the option you've chosen. This is the expected outcome, and this is the duration that we're going to have the listing active. And are you good with this? And they all said yes. I mean, there's one instance where they wanted to start higher against my advice. We still got the price that they wanted, but it was on the market for 21 days. And,
in Atlanta, just for the record, that's not long.
Yeah.
But in your market, that's forever.
18, she came to me and said, why don't we have an offer yet? And I said, remember the pricing discussion that we had? I told you it'd be between 18 and 24 days. Today's day 18. I'm still within that range. And then on day 21, we actually got an offer that was above where I told her it would sell. So it worked. But again, I repeated it back to her, and she said, you're right. We did have that conversation. You are within the range. She completely understands it. So it's just setting expectations with them.
That's great. So when you interview, I know you've had examples of, you've gone into a listing presentation and everybody's given the same price and you gave a higher price. I don't want to give too much of the story away, but give us a great story on, and I want to go both ways with this, but in one where you actually priced over the agents and you were right. How did you know you were right? And I think I know the answer to that, but I want you to elaborate on that. And then how did you have had a listing that they called you and said, we've chosen another agent, and you had the conversation with them. And this isn't a sales pitch. This is a communication thing on, wait a minute, you were able to communicate with them, and they did hire you, and they made like, I think it was like $750,000, and they would have on the transaction.
Yeah. And so none of this is a sales pitch. Like,
exactly.
Nobody wants to be sold to.
Exactly.
It's all discussion, and it's a conversation, and that's how I go in there. And they already have the materials. You're talking about it, and then you're answering questions. That's it. It's a discussion of how I'm going to achieve what you want me to achieve. That's it. So I don't sell to people first. And there was this one listing, as we talked about before. They interviewed 4 agents, and they were all the top agents in the market. And then me, who I'm newer, but I'm still close to the top at the time, and now I am at the top. But they interviewed all the agents. All the agents came in with prices. They were about $2.5 million was the highest. Most of them were like between 2.2 and 2.4, and I went in and said 2.8 all day long. And they said, "How on earth can you justify that?" And I said, "Well, you're looking at similar sales. First of all, there hasn't been a sale in your neighborhood in the last 2 years, so you're looking at old data. And second of all, other agents were pulling from other neighborhoods, which weren't quite as nice and whatnot. So I said, look, your neighborhood it's special. It's a very unique, special neighborhood that everybody wants to get into. The reason why the prices haven't gone up is because there have been no sales." I said, so you can't look at comps. What you have to look at is you have to look at the trajectory of the market, and the market's going up here. So this is the price that a buyer is going to pay for your house. And so everybody, most of the agents were about 2.2 to 2.4. Mm-hmm. I went in and said 2.8, and they said, no way. They actually, they told another agent they were going to hire him. They called me and said, we've decided on another agent. I said, why would you do that? I said, did you sign the listing? They said, no. I said, okay, great. Let's have this conversation again. We talked about it again. They said, great, let's try it. We'll see. Sold it in one day, full price for $2.8 million, wow. Which is a good $300,000, $400,000 more than the other agent said they could get. And I said, hey, and they said, how did you know that? And I said, I just know what buyers are willing to pay in this neighborhood. And I knew that your house would fall within that. We found the right buyer. And that's most of the time, it's just finding the right person. Right. Unique houses, challenge houses, depending on what it is, it's just finding the right buyer. And we found the right buyer in one day.
and I would say, in houses like that, you tell me, but when I hear that, I think about houses I've had that were unique and different. And the way that I sold them was I put a spin on it. And I say spin, I mean that sounds manipulative, but there's a story behind it. Like, this house is different. Often in our business, unique means ugly. But right. Understanding that this house is special because you have an opportunity in this house that you don't have in the others, and presenting it as an opportunity. I had a house with I went, but I had one, it was an addition, but you had to go outside to get into the addition. Like, they had put this den off the back, but it was open to the patio, but not the rest of the house. And people were like, I'm going to have to finish out like a whole nother room to make this whole house connect, and this is ridiculous. And I said, no. This is how you want it, because he can stay home, ladies, and have his wings and drink his beer, and you know where he is, or your children, and you could stay at home and be at peace and never even know he's there. And we did a whole video with a punchline, but it literally, and I had a showing. In the showing, they were starting to talk about renovations, and I stopped them in their tracks and said, wait a minute, that's the whole reason why they built it this way. It's different. I didn't say this, but it was. I didn't say the it's different part, but it's different, but this isn't different. This is special. This is awesome. This is a feature. But that's, yeah, but I want to, this interview's not with Jere, but I'm relating to what you're saying, but yeah, or maybe it is.
This is totally different though.
Right, but yeah, how do you do, or give us some examples of, yeah.
Well, I'd say I fall in love with every listing I have, and that's how you sell it, is that you fall in love with the house. Even if it's the worst dog of a house.
That was great. Say that again, actually, because that is like the most powerful thing for real estate agents to understand about falling in love with every listing you have.
I do. I spend time at the house. And usually I have to get the sellers out. If they're living there, I spend time by myself. Or
yeah, we haven't talked about how you do that yet. I want to know that one too. But go ahead. About falling in love with the house.
And you spend time in the house, and you get a sense of why it's been built that way, all the great features of it, and you fall in love with the house. And that's going to enable you to pitch it to the next buyer and help them to understand why there's a quirky addition in the backyard where we have to go outside. Because you fell in love with that, you're like, okay, this totally makes sense. And then you do the pitch to this buyer and you say, this is what it is. And I do that. I literally fall in love with every house that I sell, which, I've had a lot of heartbreak, but I'm just kidding.
Because then
I'm
it
just
sells.
kidding.
It
No,
sells, and then anyway.
but it
Um,
works.
yeah. Okay. So no, that's awesome. So tell us too about, there's the one conversation that is fun to have when you realize and you see everybody's saying this house is only worth X much. And you're like, I love that one. I've had one recently where everybody thought this house was worth 100 grand less than what I saw it was worth. And we were able to generate multiple offers. And all the agents were like, no, you're $200,000 overpriced. Actually, I've had one that people were told I was $500,000 overpriced on a $2.5 million property. And we sold it for almost asking because it's understanding your market and knowing what people value and where the value is. There can be houses that look great on paper, but they're not what buyers want. And there are houses that don't look great in paper, but when you understand what that product is and what people value, it sells for more money. But then we have the less fun part of our job where the house, the seller thinks it's worth this, they want it to be worth this, but we know that we're doing a disservice and we've got to communicate in a way that they understand before they shoot themselves in the foot what the real value is. How do you have those conversations with people? And maybe you're so good at it, you're like, where's the challenge in that? But go for it anyway.
No, nobody's that good.
You're pretty good. You're pretty good with being candid with people.
It's practice all the time, but I actually have a pretty good story about that. And one house, it's a listing we went on. We sat through the listing discussion because it's a discussion, not a presentation. And the seller, I said,
say that again too. Don't lose your story. But
it's a listing discussion.
It's a discussion. Listing presentation was made up by realtors, and nobody knows what that is but us. And when we get that in our head, it ruins it.
Who likes to be presented to? Nobody likes that.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Okay,
anyway,
so it's your discussion.
I was at my discussion with the sellers, and I came up with a price before we went to the meeting. Which it was a high price. It was a big price. It was we were still about $600,000 over the last historical sale in town. And I went in and I said, it's a very special, unique house. I think we can get this number. I never share my number first. I always let the seller start, and they started. And the number that they spit out was additionally $500,000 higher than my number, which was a high number. And, I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I can do this. I can definitely do this. And again, it was modern construction. It was a very unique property, good size, views, everything. I mean, it was the full package. And I said, you know what? I think I can do this. So I said, hey, the price that you want is still a little bit high. We'll try to get
1.1 million over the last sale, right?
Yeah,
if I did my numbers right.
$5.5 million sale. They wanted 5.7, and I was like, okay, I think I can do 5.5. Comps, if you're looking at comps, which I look at them for guidance, but then you always just figure out what somebody's going to pay for it. Said it should have been about 4.5 to 5 max, maybe 4 to 8. Anyway, I said, look, I think we can get 5.5. I don't think we can get 5.7. And I showed it 3 times, and this was off market, never hit the MLS, very quiet sale. 3 times, the third buyer bought it. So the third buyer was actually, it's a tech person, mid-30s, for $5.5 million, overweight, and so it was a very vertical house. It's actually 4 stories tall with an elevator and about 175 steps to get up to the top floor. And I was thinking, oh dear, this guy's overweight. There's no way he's going to buy this house. We take the elevator up. First we get in the elevator drops about a foot. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take the stairs. I'll meet you at the top. So I meet him at the top. I'm walking through the house. I'm touring the house. And I always love showing my listings because, again, I've fallen in love with it. I can convey that to the buyer. So I'm showing him the listing. We go through the whole house. We get out to the master balcony deck. And there's the pavers that are on a grid for drainage on the balcony. He walks out to the balcony, and he busts through one of the pavers. Broke through it. And I said, oh my gosh. And it was going okay until, the elevator and then the paver and everything else.
And this guy bought the house.
He bought the house. And I was thinking, we went in the other room and I texted my partner. I said, there's no way this guy's buying the house. I mean, after the elevator and busting through the paver, and he was mortified. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he buying the house. But anyway, so the record highest sale was $4.4 million in that city, in the history of that city. And one of my colleagues at Sotheby's sold that house for 4.4 and was panicking about the value. And then I sold this, and she said, oh, never mind, we're fine. But, historically, it was $1 million over the last historical sale. But I knew that, some young tech person was going to fall in love with it and buy the house, as I fell in love with the house when I was showing it.
So maybe you guys don't have this problem in your market, but I want to know the other side of where the seller wants to sell it for $6 million and it's just not going to sell for $6 million. The house is going to sell for $5 million. How do you, is that where you refuse the business? Is there a conversation you've had to bring them, and you may be in a market where that doesn't happen?
No, it happens all the time, especially the higher price points. I mean, this one, we didn't get what she wanted, but we were pretty darn close. It happens all the time, and as the prices creep up, sellers want more, and very often they say, yeah, I want this number, and you think, oh, there's no way in hell. Heck.
Yeah. Hey, it's a podcast. It's not the radio. You can cuss.
Yeah. We just went on a presentation, and I went with one of my colleagues, and we went into the presentation. It was my area of expertise. I said, look, this house is like 14, maybe we could get 15 out of it. And the seller said 20. And I said, there's no way. And basically, we exited the interview. We didn't get the listing. It's on the market for 20 right now, and it's not selling. And that's exactly what we said.
Wow. So sometimes it's okay to walk away from business. And if you can be the second or third agent,
it's
all
wise.
the better.
Exactly. Because, they're going to remember what we said. We had our pricing on that one. It's better to not take an overpriced listing than it is to, sit there and suffer, and you're paying for the marketing and beating your head against it, and then the calls with the sellers and whatnot. So, there's a lot of unrealistic sellers, but fortunately, I've had great clients. They always listen to my guidance, and things.
It sounds like your formula is take the sellers who are reasonable, take the sellers who are going to take your advice, and we had an interview with Jack Cotton, and he said, I go into a listing and I say, he doesn't say this out loud, but he has in his mind, why should I take your listing? I'm going to spend money. I'm going to do a lot of stuff. Or he goes, well, I'm not going to do it, but Maureen's going to do it. But there's a lot of work and hours and time of work that is going to be put into this listing. So I come into a listing appointment with the frame of mind of asking myself, why am I going to take this listing? Or why am I going to take your listing?
Yeah.
And why am I going to take your listing? Why am I going to take your listing? And if it presents to itself that it's a listing with a seller who's reasonable, that's going to sell, that is a nice person that he wants to work with, and that wants to work with him, he's going to take it. And if it's not, he's not.
That's right. And it's one step away from it. I've been very fortunate that the majority, about 90% of my business is by referral. Most of it's past client referral or past client sales. And then, about 30% is within the network, within the Sotheby's International Realty Network, which is terrific, by the way.
Which is huge.
Huge.
We've got a lot of interviews about or tapping into our business. I have had clients even tell me they thought I was in a cut-through business, and I thought, are you kidding me? If that's what you want to make it. But no.
That's right.
You've got some of the most happy, ADD, no kidding, not really, but
Yeah, exactly.
happy, generous, hardworking, go-getters, and creative people and smart people that make it happen, the ones that are successful. And where else can in the recession, there were a few times where I questioned what I did. And maybe more than half the reason why I didn't was because I was like, where am I going to find people like this in my life? It's a business of amazing people.
Nurture that as well. You need to have those connections, especially within the agent community. And that was when I moved here and I didn't know a single person. I introduced myself on brokerage to every single agent I saw. And they're like, who's this guy? Like, who are you? My very first listing in Menlo Park, everybody along the way was like, oh, you could never get a listing that big. And I did. And then one of the local agents came up to me and was like, what are you doing selling in my neighborhood? Who are you? Where did you come from?
I remember that happening to me. I love it.
Of course. And I
love
said, hey,
it.
this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. And, I sold the house and I actually became good friends with her as well. But a lot of it's just putting yourself out there, introducing it, having the relationships. And that's the other thing is that those relationships are going to help you get your buyers into contract as well. And so people are like, why are you networking? Why are you talking to all these agents? And it's because these relationships are going to make or break your business.
How many conversations have I had where agents really want to make the deal work because they know if we go under contract, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I just had that as well. It was like a multiple offer situation.
Especially in your market where multiple offers are so common.
Oh yeah, there's a house that just sold. They had 17 offers on it, and it's like, how do you distinguish yourself in that? And a lot of it's just relationships, and they want to know that somebody's going to close a deal. They're looking out for their sellers in the best possible way. And if there's an agent that does good business, that always closes, that's responsive, that answers their phone. And that's the biggest thing I tell all the agents that I ever. They're like, "Oh, what's the best piece of advice you have?" I'm like, "Answer your phone."
Always. Yes.
Always. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. So how do you do, so another question is, being a busy agent, how do you make yourself available? For example, you're in showings, you're with clients, you're doing things. How do you, or what has been your best way to balance and leverage attending to clients and also attending to the phone and the text and the emails all in one, so everybody, to the best of your ability, feels like you're their only client. I mean, they're your only client.
That's right. And I want every single one of my clients to think that they are my only client. And it's hard to do. I mean, when you're out there and doing showings or, prepping houses or meeting with sellers or whatever, the whole business, it takes a lot of time for you. And so, I tell every single one of my sellers, I say, hey, if it's a long question, send me an email. I said, if it's a short question, send me a text. If it's urgent, call me. I said, but a lot of time, I'm in appointments, I can't pick up the phone. I said, so text me. And, usually you can sneak a text if, you're showing a house or showing one of your listings, you can sneak a text and say, hey, this is the answer, or I'll get back to you. I'll call you in 10 minutes, whatever it is. And they love the responsiveness. And the other thing is, as I mentioned, I have a licensed assistant, and he's my backup. And I'm like, if you need something urgent and you can't get a hold of me, call him. And he's always available as well. And so there's two of us that, can field questions and field calls.
So how what is your assistant's kind of job description? Do they do showings, to open houses, or is it all administrative and on the phone, or what's the model that you've got for your business?
So it's interesting. He's brand new to the business about 3 years ago, and he's been with me ever since. He got his license, said, I want to get into it. And so I set up a job description for him and said, hey, this is what you're going to do. And basically, you're going to work like a dog, and I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I'm available to you 24/7, which, starting out this business, they're like, here's your desk, good luck.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get started, is to have full access to an agent who's actually doing a substantial amount of business. I think my first year with him, I think we did like 28 transactions in a year, which here it's a lot. I mean, I've been number one in transactions for the last 5 years. And so we're hustling, but it's also, it's the repetitive nature of doing so many transactions, which makes you, systematize everything. You have processes for everything, and it makes you a lot more efficient. And so, it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, I never want to do that many transactions. I'm like, it actually makes you better at what you do. And, people want to hire somebody that's doing a substantial amount rather than, the agent who has one big listing per year, because they forget how to do business in that last year.
Exactly. Well, what you just said reminded me of, I quote this book often, but Good to Great. He talks about that doing something, you can be good at something or you can be less than good, but we'll just talk about good and great since that's the name of it. It's easier to be great than it is to be good. And the point of that is, in being great, that's when you've got the processes and you've implemented processes, you've got systems, you've streamlined, not to the point of, McDonald's versus a fine restaurant, but you've got a very consistent method that works and creates consistency, and it fulfills your clients' expectations and makes you successful. And that's where you're great. Where you're good is where you're not doing it very often. And I think that's a great point, because as we become more and more successful, we also, you probably have do you have clients that wonder, are you too busy for me? Do you ever have that question, and how do you overcome it? Or where do you fit in the communication with your clients on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that question all the time. And they see on social media all the listings and things, and they think, oh my gosh, there's no way. And especially on the lower price points, they're like, there's no way you'd have time for somebody who only has, an $800,000 condo. I'm like, of course. And, my average price point isn't that high. My average price point's a lot lower. And I do everything from, $200,000-$300,000 condos to, $10 million homes. And so I make time for everybody. And I always say, this is how I have it set up. I will always make time for you. If I'm not available, my assistant is there. I don't just push them off to the assistant. I said, try me first. And then it's also trial and error. It's like, give it a shot. And if you find that I am too busy, which you won't find, exactly, I'll release you from the listing. It's not a problem whatsoever. I never hold anything to it.
Yeah, and I had a recent interview with, I've mentioned Brad Henderson a lot lately, but Brad talks about, the understanding that, when you're the agent that has a lot of transactions, that means you're the agent that has your hand in and on the market, and you're the agent that has their expertise and the understanding of the market and problems, so that when the real problems come, where you're really making your money, you have the perspective on the market that the agent that does every little thing themselves and isn't doing a lot of deals, they don't have that same perspective. So it's as you grow your business and get into that position, is understanding how your clients understand that. But that doesn't mean I'm too busy, but you should use me anyway. That means understanding the value in that, but also back to what you said is the way in which you leverage on this is how to get the best response. This is how you guys communicate, and having a personal assistant who's a hustler and a hard worker behind the scenes at all times, available anytime you're not, to answer questions.
The importance is communication and setting the expectation and saying, this is how to reach me. And very often it's finding out how it is best to reach them as well. Because, not everybody wants a phone call. Not everybody wants an email.
Yeah.
They want a text. And so we start every new client, we say, how do you want us to communicate with you, and how often? Because some people are like, once a week by email, that's it. I'm like, okay, great. And some people are like, I want, twice a day, I want a text message from you. And I'm like, okay, high maintenance, but okay.
What that makes me think? I wouldn't finish what you're saying.
And so we tailor everything we do to the client. Again,
right.
Every conversation I have with a seller, with a buyer, with anything, it's not how I operate, it's how you want me to operate. And we tailor everything to them.
That's perfect. And who was our speaker from the Ritz-Carlton? It's the gentleman who spoke at G&E.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember his name. I actually researched him after. Fantastic. And he explained.
Isaac, we've got to get his name so we can tag him on our interview. But anyway, he talks about, part of the process is when they come in the front door, they assess, there's some people, they just want to know that you're there when they need you. They don't want to be bothered. They want to check in their room. Just leave me alone. I need my privacy and to enjoy the beautiful environment. There are other people, they would love if you would take them out of the car and carry them to the reception and have men with fans. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but there are other people who want that attention. And you don't give somebody attention because you think that's what it's supposed to be. You figure out what they want, and you create a team and a structure in which you can provide them that and
exactly.
Give them what they're looking for. So
we do
you reminded me of that.
I mean, even on every single listing, when I show a listing, I say, hey, I know this house inside and out. I can tell you every detail about this house. I would love to tour you around, but it's totally up to you. Do you want a fully guided tour, or do you want to explore it on your own? And they're always like, fully guided tour, please. And it's like, that's the opportunity you have to pitch this house, to sell it, to show them how much you love it. And that's what I like about that. But, some of them like, I'm just going to explore. I'm like, perfect. I'll just be in the other room. If you have any questions, just yell. I'm right there.
Exactly. And that one more story to elaborate on, and then I've got a question for you. But I don't know if you watched Shin Schultz's interview on the show, but he talked about when he got into the business, everybody, they want to work hard and they want to show the house, and they're supposed to have a job and they're supposed to do it. And he would come in and he would do that. And I wish I could remember who the client was, but it was a big guy buying a $20-30 million house in Malibu. And he said, Shin, can I offer you a piece of advice? And you know Shin pretty well, don't you?
I do know Shin.
I mean, Shin's like meditates, Zen, like nothing's personal. And Shin's like, yeah, sure. And he goes, I make about $1 billion a year. I don't need some realtor telling me what to do and don't like. I need you to not speak and have the answers to my questions when I have them. And Shin says, gotcha. He said, I took the advice. He bought the house. It changed my business. It literally, not that he went to listings and didn't speak, but he attuned himself to what does the client really want and looking for. It's not about me and what I'm doing. It's about backing off, figuring out what they want, and delivering on that level. It's not about being, you've been in those showings where the agent's down your back and you're just like, really, I can't see the house because you won't go away, and figuring out if that's who that buyer is. So.
A lot of the time, it's just the agent wants to put on the show, and half the time, like I said, the agents get in their own way and they create the problems. And it's the funniest thing. I mean, back when I was just starting my career, I walked into this house and it was the most ornate, horrible, in my opinion, marble house with marble this and marble that, and it was awful. I walked in with some clients. They were foreign buyers, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this house," and they said, "It's beautiful." And I was about to say, "Could be remodeled. We could take care of this." And they're like, "We love it," and they bought that house. And I was like, "Okay, that's what I learned a long time ago. Stop talking."
Thank you. Because I have been in so many showings on the other side of the table, even as a listing agent, where the buyer agent comes through and just starts nitpicking, and I just kind of step in and start telling stories or divert, because you don't know, like, your client, don't peer pressure them into what you like. It's about what our focus as realtors is. What does your client want? And let's, in their best interest.
That's right. Yeah. I don't
help them get what they want and what they love.
And the buyer's agent was late to the showing, which I love, because buyer's agents are always late. So yeah. I get to show the house. I love it.
And get to know them and engage and make it happen. It's the best. Yeah.
So I met the buyers. We go through the whole house. We're showing the house. Basically sold it. Like, the contract was just about signed. And then the buyer's agent shows up and it's like, "Oh, but did you see the kitchen? Oh, and it's this." And all of a sudden, all her opinions. And they were like, "Yeah, maybe we shouldn't buy this house." Anyway, they came back through for another show.
What a great lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. And she ruined the sale. She blew the sale. But it turns out that they ended up buying the house. They called back later. They're like, "Let's see it one more time." And they're like, "This really does work for me." But she, again, almost blew the sale.
I've had that happen with buyer agents. And you bring it around as a listing agent, but it's funny how it's a lesson to all of us as agents, where it's like, let's watch ourselves. It's not about us. It's about them.
It's about them, exactly. And it's the same thing with the sellers. It's the same thing with the buyers. It's not about you, and it's not about what a great agent you are. It's about you doing the best for them and getting them what they want. And
I'm gonna totally go Shen on you now, because that's what I love about this business. Shen's gonna appreciate this interview, I hope. But it's also about, it's the same thing in life. I love that about this business. This business is so challenging, but the same lessons you learn in this business are the lessons in life. It's not always about you. And there's so much peace to be found in that. Just saying. Tell us, what is a book? If there's one book you would recommend, what is it?
So I knew this question was coming. I've done my research on you.
You've listened a few times, so even though you didn't read the questions, no, just kidding. Anyway, which I love. I love it.
So there's a lot of books. I mean, I've started reading a lot more than I used to, and I get at least one piece of good information on every book. The one that I like right now is Never Split the Difference. It's one of my favorite books, and I know you know this one.
As you know, oh my gosh, you better not be brown-nosing.
I read this before we talked.
It is brilliant. Yeah.
It's such a good book. But again, like I said, not everything in that book is going to work for everybody, but just taking...
Yes, it is.
Okay. I know.
I'm so sorry. I'm being so bad. Go ahead.
Honestly, yeah, it's the information that you'll get from that book is far better than most people do on their own anyway. So the other book I really like is it's called Brief. And it's just brief. So
I want to know first, not to totally keep interrupting you, but on Never Split the Difference, because I did interrupt you, and I want to know what was your personal takeaway on Never Split the Difference, and then we'll talk about Brief.
I mean, a lot of it, one of the biggest things is listen to what isn't being said. And it comes back to our jobs all the time.
Well said. I've never heard somebody put it that way. Listen to what isn't being said. Yeah. Okay, so go on.
That's the best piece of advice out of that book. I mean, there's a lot about negotiation. There's a lot about finding the unknown unknowns, which I love, because it's like, not only is it what you know that you don't know, but it's what you don't know you don't know. But it's anyway, it's the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
But I mean, listen to what isn't being said, I think, is the most valuable piece of that book.
I love it. So Brief, what did you get from Brief?
Brief is good. Brief is how to be a lean communicator. And it's basically, which has changed my entire way of emailing, my entire way of communicating with clients.
We talked about this. Yeah.
You condense what you're saying down into like 3 sentences. Because agents go on and on and on. Again, I went on a co-list with another agent. He talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, and the seller heard none of it. My best part of this is that he sent this really long, it was like a 3-page email. The last line was something critical about closing the escrow, moving out, and it was the last line of this 3-page email. They never saw it. And I'm like, okay, great. And so brief is all about this. It's being a being a lean communicator, getting to the point. I mean, my biggest problem with brief, the book itself, it could be a little bit more brief.
Well, and here's about brief. Maybe that's why he wrote it, because it was his own lesson. But the thing about brief, I love that you brought those two books up, because talking about never split the difference. The book I haven't read Brief, but I am going to be reading it. And Isaac is writing all this down to make sure I do, and to make sure we share these with everybody else. But, right, Isaac? Isaac loves it when I pick on him. Everybody in the country knows Isaac, because I'm always talking to Isaac on the show. But on that, there have been, from never split the difference, there have been interactions I've had in negotiating or with clients who have gotten emotional, where it would have been, human nature would have been to explain away to them. And I have stopped. I have listened to what isn't being said. And I have responded with questions that are appropriate to what isn't being said, and literally transformed them with a simple act of actively listening and asking the right question that has literally given them a complete 180 without ever saying a thing, just asking that question. And it goes back to the same thing with brief. What's that?
So that's when you become the Jedi real estate agent.
I love it. I mean, if we could just go on and flip the interview with Jere Metcalf today. No, I'm kidding. But really, I have so many stories where, people were getting emotional, people were being silly and doing what we do in real estate, and I just heard it. I took it in. I assessed it, listened to what wasn't being said, understood the perspective, asked the question to give them the perspective they were looking for without trying to let them feel convinced. The minute you're convincing somebody, that puts them on the other side of the table. And the minute they're on the other side of the table, it's all lost.
Yeah. And half the time, they understand what it is. They just need to vent. And so you listen.
Exactly.
You they talk themselves through it, and they stop and they're like, wait, why aren't you responding? Oh, never mind. I've solved the problem. I'm like, perfect. This is what I would have said. Or, you just interject and say, okay, now that you've just told me all this, here's the one sentence that's going to finish this whole thing for you, finish the whole thought.
Exactly.
And then this is amazing. So brief.
I can't wait to read Brief to put that in with my never split the difference.
I told you about this when we met, because I just saw you in Austin.
Yes.
I told you about The Obstacle is the Way, right? That's the other one.
Which book is this one?
It's called The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh, just the title alone, I love it.
My trainer told me about this. So, I'm a firm believer in
I
exercise.
do remember now, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And so my trainer told me about this. And again, most of these books, this could have been condensed down to a much shorter version of it. But, it's rather than having the obstacle and finding a way around it, it's actually pushing through it. And this is one thing that I've used for years and I never realized, especially overcoming public speaking and things that I hated to do. I always force myself to do this now. You don't know this about me as well, but I call myself an extroverted introvert. And so as a kid, I didn't say a word. I was basically mute, didn't talk to anybody. And then I moved to Northern California and I said, oh my gosh, I can't possibly do this. I started a social happy hour group, which became a networking group, and forced myself to talk to people. Grew this whole thing. My distribution list is 1,000 people on this now. And it's just basically, I forced myself out of the comfort zone, and that was my obstacle. And rather than saying, okay, I can work around it, I went head on for it. I beat it, and now it's I can have a conversation with anybody. So it's helped me. So all of this was before the book, but it explains a whole lot, which I think is great. So
that's great. Well, and when you overcome things like that, what it gives you, the self-awareness, it's not only the self-awareness, but the self-confidence of what you can overcome is liberating.
Absolutely. Right. So I love a good.
So we got 3 books, and I'm usually just one, but I kind of like all 3. If there's one that you do like the best, what would it be?
It's probably Never Split the Difference. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Wait, which one is it? The Obstacle is the Way?
Never
That
Split
one?
the Difference.
Oh, I can't wait. I love it. Okay, so good books to read. So our last and final question, you know what it is, but I've got to ask it anyway. What is, because we have covered a lot, if there's one thing that we need, that you would have me and everyone listening to this interview take away, what would you want to be sure that is?
There's just so much. I don't know.
That's why I love this question.
I know.
I love the
Be
answer.
resource. My favorite bit of advice is just be the resource to everybody. Be available, talk to everybody, be that person that they go to, because you're going to maintain those relationships and they're going to keep coming back to you for years. And I think that's really important. Help them out, offer advice, like I said, I do like consults on design and kitchen and stuff like that. I don't get paid for that, but I get paid because they remember me.
And you're doing things like that, and it's not like usually people doing things like that are doing 5 huge deals a year. You're doing more transactions than anyone. What is it in your market in Sotheby's or for 5 years? What's that?
In the Sotheby's here. In our
right.
office.
I mean, you're one of the top agents, and is it corporate or how does? I mean, you're up there. You don't like talking about your rankings and what a badass you are, which is ridiculous. But you are one of the top agents in our entire company, and you're doing more transactions than anyone, and yet you're taking the time to do color consults for people. I mean, that's right. like how do you balance that out?
You just squeeze it in. It's like, yeah, I've got 1 hour of time today, and I'm like, okay, I can stop by between 3 and 4. I'll be in between appointments. I mean, frankly, it's terrible. Like I eat my lunch in my car because you're back to back to back appointments.
Have you done the mobile app at Starbucks? That's what I do. The mobile app. Like I like live on that. I mean, I bet my Starbucks bill is higher than my grocery bill for my whole family. Which maybe my husband, he doesn't listen to this show because he might lose it. But not that whatever. He's a great husband, everybody. But anyway, maybe we'll edit that out, and we won't. But
yeah. Exactly.
No, but I eat lunch with people. I do that, but there are days where you don't. It depends on what the day calls for and what the clients call for. So
that's right. Again, it's being that person and molding yourself to what they want and what they need. Yeah. So.
Wow. Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been awesome having you. You're so much fun. I think we covered 3 topics, so it'll be exciting to see how we title this. This is gonna be fun. But again, thank you. You're the bomb. What's that?
I said, didn't even tell everybody about our run.
I know. We didn't even talk about our run. Everybody already knows. The fittest guy, by the way, also the fittest guy in Silicon Valley. So, no, what were you, I loved it. I landed in the airplane. Hey, let's go for a run. All right, I'll meet you. You've run 6 miles, and you're like, okay, we're going to slow down now, and I'm still panting. And for the record, ask Todd Peter. He'll die if this part of this interview gets published. But he couldn't keep up with me. But I couldn't keep up with you. It's great. So we have to do it again.
It's alternative networking is what it is. Rather than sitting in a meeting or at a conference.
Well, it's the best. We've had some of our best conversations running because the endorphins are kicking in. You're feeling good. You're getting your workout. You're seeing the city. It's awesome.
You don't have a phone. There's nobody around you. I mean, you block out all the noise.
You're right. That you can't get your text messages.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, maybe sometimes. I think sometimes we stop and check the phones, but usually we're pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Well, it's been awesome. I always love talking to you. So.
You too. All right, I'll see you soon.